And with that, I'm delighted to introduce you all to today's presenters and panelists. So we have a number of panelists today. We have from the family of Woodstock, we have Robert Molina and Jennifer Panetta. And then from Maverick Psychotherapy, we have Naima Mohammed. From OMH, we have Shannon Graham-Smith. And then from OCFS, we have our moderator today, Madeline Hare. And so Madeline, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll leave this slide up. We have about our different partners today, maybe just for briefly, but then I can take the slides down as soon as you're ready to start the panel.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Madeline Hare. I work for the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. I'm a senior director in the Division of Youth Development and Partnerships for Success. And part of my portfolio includes the Runaway and Homeless Youth work, which brings me here with you all today, and I'm thrilled to be here. So like you heard, this is the part 2 of a webinar series talking about the intersections of runaway and homeless youth and mental health. If you want an intro to what Runaway and Homeless Youth Services are and how they function in New York State, I would refer you back to that part 1. That's where we cover it. But today we're really excited to have a panel talking about the on-the-ground practice and how to make things work the best we can for young people who are served in our settings and have mental health needs. So let's get into it, right? So I want to start by grounding ourselves in the most basic practices of runaway and homeless youth services, which is positive youth development and harm reduction. So positive youth development is an intentional pro-social approach that engages young people in their communities in a way that is productive and constructive. It is grounded all in youth's strengths, helping to highlight and build on those strengths by providing opportunities and leadership opportunities for young people. Harm reduction recognizes that people do things that are unsafe. That's a fact of life. And rather than try and cut that right off at the pass, we try to work with people to make those unsafe decisions a little bit safer. So the kind of quintessential example of that is most of us drive cars. Driving cars is very unsafe. So most of us wear seatbelts. So there are things that we can do every day to make dangerous things more safe. That is fundamental to how we work with young people in runaway and homeless youth programs. So my first question for our panel, I'm going to turn it to Robert and Jen. I'm going to ask you to both first introduce yourselves a little bit and the programs that you work in, and then talk about how positive youth development and harm reduction show up in your programs.
All right. So my name is Jen Panetta, and I am a director and team leader for Family of Woodstock's Transitional Living Program. So we house 16 to 21-year-olds for up to 18 months, sometimes 2 years if they come in at 16. So and are still in high school. So we have youth for a good long while. And positive youth development is like a huge part of what we're doing and harm reduction, because we're recognizing that youth come to us with all different life experiences, and they have learned different ways to get their needs met. And the expectation that we would just take a youth who has struggled with either homelessness, sometimes generational homelessness, sometimes frequent moving around from caregiver to caregiver, and then coming into a program and knowing all the ways to make healthy decisions would be unrealistic for us. And so we look at how we're able to utilize the components of positive youth development, like opportunities to belong, and ways that we can really create a home-like environment for the youth to not only gain trusting bonds with the staff, but also with one another, and have kind of this mutual respect that goes between the staff, the residents, each other, all of them recognizing that they're creating a home for themselves that they would want to live in as well. And the beauty of that is we do have a good amount of time to be able to do that. And so a lot of our youth come to us from situations where they might have only been able to look at what today is bringing. Sometimes they're couch surfing, sometimes they have um, a lot of times they're in maybe a crisis situation, such as Robert will speak to, which is our crisis shelter for young younger adolescents. Family also has homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters. So Midway, which is the program that I run, Midway sees youth from all parts of our agency who are doing the crisis work and who are recognizing that, like, I don't have a place that I'm going to be able to land for a significant amount of time. And we get to be that significant amount of time. The biggest, I would say, the biggest success, the biggest part of our program that leads to success is how much our staff get really invested in being able to provide ongoing support with a recognition that the youth are going to mess up, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to need time to learn new habits, new ways of communicating. They're going to need time to be open to resources. They're going to need time to trust us. And having that acknowledgement and having that knowledge of knowing that um, helps them have the patience and the willingness to show up every day and be able to help them incrementally. Um, Midway, we have two households. So we have one in the city of Kingston, and then we also have one in Ellenville, which is more of a rural kind of little town. Um, so they run kind of differently as well. And we acknowledge that sometimes our high schoolers, our 16 and 17-year-olds, do better a little bit in the rural area where they can kind of just really connect with the household. They have a lot of family dinners, a lot of connection going on there, and get themselves through high school. And that can be their goal. Sometimes they're trying to work, sometimes they're also trying to uh, uh, maybe do some work or vocational stuff. Anything that they might want to try while they're living at Midway is supported because we have the time, which is lovely. In Kingston, we end up having a lot of our older youth um, who might end up getting their full-time job, finishing out high school, getting their full-time job. And we have a lot of youth who also connect to our community college. And that's been a such a just such a blessing because there's a lot of supports that are understanding of the needs of the kids that we have here to be able to help them get their college degree. And so yeah, I'll throw it over to Robert to talk a little bit about the younger kids, and because he sees them when they're kind of deep in crisis. We get them a little after, a little more stabilized. So go ahead, Robert.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I'm glad that we are actually having this conversation today. So my name is Robert Molina, and I help to manage the Family of Woodstock Crisis Shelter in Ulster County, better known as Family House. And I just want to say very quickly that Jen truly runs an amazing midway transitional living program. We're fortunate to be part of the same agency. And of course, we're very thankful to have Naima with Maverick as part of our team as well. But so many of our young people at Family House, they basically successfully transitioned from Family House into the Midway program. Now, with regard to Family House, we do offer short-term emergency shelter for up to 14 runaway and homeless youth, typically primarily between the ages of 12 and 17 years old. Most of our young people will stay with us up until 30 days. And during that time, parental consent is not required. However, in the event that a young person's situation calls for an extended stay, then we handle that on a case-by-case basis. Some examples for an extended stay may include, for example, if there's ongoing family conflict, if there's safety concerns with the young person returning back home, perhaps if there's an outstanding legal situation that needs to be settled, or when the family simply just needs a bit more time to work on their reunification. When it comes to the building itself, we are located in Rosendale, New York, and we really try to create a welcoming and supportive space. The teen shelter, it has 7 bedrooms with bunk beds in each room. We are co-ed. We have separate rooms for boys and girls. But I think what's important to mention is that we are very intentional about being inclusive of LGBTQ youth. We understand that, unfortunately, queer young people oftentimes face risks around depression and all the more mental health challenges. And so my team and I, we try to remain very conscious of that. And we make it a point to really make all of our young people feel as safe and as seen and as respected as possible. For example, we do have a bedroom that's actually specifically designated for any young person who may be coming out, questioning, transitioning between genders. We really do honor every young person, regardless of their identity, whether they identify as transgender, non-binary, another gender. Not to mention the fact that we have one room in particular that, along with different program spaces, they're intentionally decorated with items that signify allyship. Whether some of those items may include flags, posters, artwork. And really the point that I want to bring home on today's panel is just that we value diversity, but we really do honor and value every young person. They should be treated with dignity and respect, and we take that very, very seriously. Having said that, with regard to who we serve and the young people who are coming to Family House, they are, for the most part, they're experiencing homelessness, they're running away from home, and or they're living in unstable situations. Most of our young people are coping with some type of family conflict. And sadly, as you could imagine, some of them have experienced abuse or neglect. We have young people that are in the process of transitioning to the foster care system. So for example, they may be staying with us temporarily until a new placement can be found. One of our main goals is family reunification and really helping the young people and the families work towards healing and finding forgiveness. And then when possible, returning back together as a family again. Now, as part of creating a welcoming and a non-judgmental environment, we apply the principles, as Jen mentioned, positive youth development and harm reduction. And so at this time, I'd like to show a couple of slides if I can. I just want to be able to take a moment to show how we apply some of these two overlapping principles over at Family House. And so, Jackie, whenever you're ready, if you could put the first slide up. So with regard to the first slide, we do make sure that our young people have a daily schedule so that they know what to expect every day. For example, when it's time for homework or chores, dinner or group activities, on some days we may bring a guest speaker, or on other days we may have the youth go out into the community for an event or an outdoor recreational activity. Now, technically, the image that you're seeing on the screen, I do want to clarify, that's technically a copy of the summertime schedule, but I'm more importantly, just having a consistent, predictable, everyday structure. It does support positive youth development and harm reduction because it helps young people feel safe and grounded and supported. If I can have the next slide. At Family of Woodstock, anyone who knows Family of Woodstock, you would know that one of our greatest value is to be non-judgmental. And so when I helped to reword the program's rules just a couple of years ago, I basically broke them down into smaller core values that the young people could connect with. So for example, unity being the first one, in other words, striving to be non-judgmental, along with dignity, respect, integrity, gratitude, responsibility, and accountability. These values are all posted along our stairwell as pretty much a friendly reminder. It's just a way for the youth to build character and for us to really focus less on control and more on growth and understanding. If I could please have the next slide. We also use what we call a level system. And over time, this has become a great way for youth to earn points throughout the week, pretty much as they attend school, as they complete their chores, as they participate with activities, they can all level up. And then those points translate into weekly allowance money, which is not a bad thing. The highest level is that of peer leader. And basically a resident who's a peer leader is someone who is deemed by the staff as modeling the program's expectations, exemplifying our core values, which I mentioned, and really showing themselves to be a positive role model for other youth. If I could please have the next slide. Now, when it comes to staffing, I always try to pay attention during interviews to see if an applicant brings along with them some lived experience. Similar to a peer leader, we believe that someone who has been through some challenges in their lives can oftentimes connect with youth on a deeper level. So, for example, one of our recent staff members, he actually not only went through the Family House program, he later completed the Midway program. And today he's a residential counselor. And I could say that so many of our young people really look to him as a mentor and as a true example of somebody who has overcome adversity. He's truly greatly loved at Family House. If I can have the next slide. Most recently, we hired a new kitchen manager. She enjoys cooking meals that the youth actually want to eat. As long as the meals are healthy, we respect their preferences, which then gives them a sense of choice and helps build trust and connection. Now, I have to also say, I think the meal here that's posted, it's a relatively simple meal. I think this was basically put together quickly for the July 4th cookout. But I know that she has also introduced our young people in the past to some ethnic dishes, which I thought was pretty awesome. And then in a similar way, as noted on the PowerPoint, we encourage you to also share their input as it pertains to recreational activities and those that they would much rather participate with. If I could please have the next slide. At the program, we strive to celebrate a young person's accomplishments despite the hardship that they're going through. And I can say that sometimes it can be pretty random when doing so. So for example, the image that you're looking at this past summer, we had recognized a few of our young people for different accomplishments. They were really going through different struggles, but one of them had been acknowledged for holding a summertime job. Another had been recognized for staying consistent with field hockey and so forth. And so as photographed, they all received what I wound up calling a World Changer Award. And these small certificates just really help the young person to feel seen and connected and motivated to keep pressing forward despite their challenges. If I can have the next slide. And then with regard to this slide, just in summary, we use reflective or reflection activities to help youth build self-awareness, critical thinking, decision-making. For some of the older youth, for instance, we have given them the Myers-Briggs test as part of discovering their strengths, or we'll have the young people participate with creative arts. We partner with the WAM Museum up in Woodstock, have a great collaboration with them, or our discussion circles are dedicated, for the young people to just practice not only communication skills, but just empathy and listening to their peers. And then we will occasionally distribute surveys as a way for the young people to provide some of their current feedback on their shelter experiences. And that concludes my slides. I hope that these examples were insightful. I know that it's very important for my team over at Family House to create as much of a warm environment as possible. And, whether that's between the implementation of the daily schedule, the 7 core values, peer leadership, celebrations, and those reflection activities.
Thank you. That was a really great kind of overview and bringing us to, the foundational principles of Runaway and Homeless Youth. And I want to now dig into the very specific intersection between Runaway and Homeless Youth programs and mental health. So we know that many of the young people served in our Runaway and Homeless Youth programs come to us with mental health needs, whether it be their own personal mental health and wellness or the mental health needs of someone in their home. And that was part of what led them to be served in one of our settings. So Robert and Jen, again, I'm going to ask you if you could talk about what you see in the young people that you serve in terms of mental health needs. What are the biggest trends? What are the concerning behaviors? How do you know that a young person has a mental health need? What does it look like?
Absolutely. Jen, do you want to maybe?
Sure. I'll kick it off with our kids that we have here. I would say, Madeline, you already touched a little bit on the mental health needs of the parents and the caregivers are often a reason how our youth are coming to us. We have a lot of youth with some generational homelessness. I have a few youth who have spent pretty much most of their lives, and they're both 20 years old, kind of in hotels and motels and stuff like that. And their parents are still continue to be homeless now. And so that I feel has been increasing over the past few years. Another increase that I've noticed in the last few years is just the through incarceration or through death, the youth are also losing their parents and their caregivers, sometimes from suicide, sometimes from an overdose of some sort. So, and sometimes some hefty, um, some long-term incarceration. So they're not going to have their parents back during their childhood, and so that has been an interesting thing to to interact with the youth because there's so many levels of grief in that and abandonment and rejection that we then see kind of manifest in how we're bonding and how they're trusting us as well. Um, and I'm finding that the youth, particularly the youth who have lost a parent to either suicide or an overdose, I've had some youth have some just such difficult, some like the leading up to it were many were difficult years, and then the event was a difficult year, and then what happened after the event and where they were taken and what systems got them and where they ended up and who I've had so many youth tell me that they thought they were going to be able to stay somewhere and ended up day of all of a sudden being moved somewhere else. And so I'm so thankful at Midway that we actually have a good amount of time because we are able to provide them with their own bedroom. We give them Family House is getting them to a place where they're able to, okay, I'm safe. I have safe people around me. We're going to be figuring out what the next steps are. This isn't my forever place. I'm not going to be here for too long, but I got to figure out the next steps, and who's on my team, right? And then you come to Midway, and Midway gives you your own room. We give you a key to the house. We're trying to make it so that this becomes your home until you are able to transition into your permanent housing. Um, and so with that, I would say 9 times out of 10, I got the kids that are coming in, there's relief. There's so much relief, but then that relief is really uncomfortable and they're not sure who to trust. They are not sure that their connections are all um, confusing. They're trying to get through high school. They might be trying to figure out income at some point. They don't know where I have some kids that are still living in the day. I have other kids that are so anxious because they're not sure what's next. And even though I can say it's a year and a half from now, if all goes well, like you got time, both I know and they know that's not a lot of time. And they don't have this safety net of where, I'm 45 years old. I still have a mom I could call if stuff goes sideways. I have a mom I can call and I'm going to have a place to be, right? There's no safety net if this doesn't go well. And so they're navigating us and they're navigating all this grief and anxiety and the effects of loss and rejection and possibly even, um, so there's usually in the story somewhere there's some kind of abuse, um, be it from people that they were, that were trusted to care for them. And so it's such a courageous thing to me when youth come to Midway. I feel like I would have been terrified. You're moving into this house, there's a bunch of adults, there's people living sleeping in rooms next to you. Um, but we do our best to really try to navigate their ability to, in their own time, access services. So that might mean that we're seeing the effects of depression, anxiety, the stuff that's coming up from their trauma. And we're not a mental health program. We are a runaway and homeless youth program. And while some of us have backgrounds in that, we're not providing therapy. There's no therapist that's full time here. We are providing consistency and care and patience and flexibility and choice so that they are starting to get to a place where they are recognizing that they have a voice, they have a choice in what their life looks like, and that we are here. I have John who works for me here. It's case manager, and he's saying like, I work for you. What you want to do, I'm here to help you do it. I'm not here to give you rules and tell you what to do and all of that stuff. And so while the house is structured, we have one overnight staff. We have a staff cell phone so that the kids, if they have the phone, they're able to just text us or call us. And we put a value on communication above all else. Your curfew is 9 p.m. You blow that and don't even call and you make us all worry about it, that's one conversation to have with you. If you call me at 8:45 and say, "Oh my goodness, I thought we were closer. We're probably going to get there around 9:15. I just want to let you know I'm cool and I'm on my way." We're done. We're not talking about it again. You did exactly what you needed to do. And that's the kind of stuff of trying to help them calm their nervous system and recognize that people are there for you to help you and not to power over you. Um, and there's so, and you know, the grief part, I think we're still navigating it because there's parts of it that we can't really touch quite yet. I had a young girl here. She was 17. She was pregnant. She was 7 months pregnant. This is the first time this girl moved in with her mother in an urn in under her arm, and she was 7 months pregnant. She was 17. She came in and she had so much trauma, and she came in and she was doing all right. There was a lot of stuff going on for her. Her system, she was so overwhelmed, her stress, the trauma, there was so much going on for her. And she could say that, when we would talk about therapy. She's been in there. She was pushed into therapy her whole childhood. I don't want therapy. That doesn't help me. I don't have a say. I don't have, she didn't have a say in her past. So many youth come to us having been forced to go to therapy when they were a kid and feeling like they had no choice in it. And so when I say therapy, they think power over, tell me what to do. I don't want to do it. And at some point after the baby was born, the baby was like maybe 6 months, and all this stuff was coming up, and the anniversary of her mother's death. So many things were happening. And she looked at me and she said, "Jen, how can I start opening those doors right now when I have a 6-month-old to take care of and I have to figure out where I'm going to live next? How can I do it?" And I said, "You're right. I get it. I totally understand that this is going to take time. And there's going to be small ways that we're going to be able to help you in the day, connect you possibly to maybe not a formal therapist, but the ability to connect with a mentor, the ability to get connected to some kind of resource that might have some clinical support, but they're not giving you therapy, but there's someone there that maybe you can connect to. Like little ways that we can start to attend to that. Um, and that way and there was so much that she needed help with, but we needed to be able to listen to her, to believe her, to trust her, to have her be her own, like the expert in her life, and for her to tell me what she needs and wants, and to be able to respect that, and for her to know that we respect that. And that doesn't mean, and we say this all the time, that doesn't mean that this kid is not sitting in my office for 2 hours talking to me as if she would a therapist. And if she could, and doing that every other day, and if she could do that with it, it's the same stuff. And I would sometimes say, what you're doing, you can do ongoing. But we build this trust first, and it takes so much effort and courage to do that, that I have to respect sometimes that the work that we need to do happens on site, and then we're able to get them into ongoing stuff because we are temporary. Um, I would say we also see a lot of youth are who identify as LGBTQAI plus and have families that are not supporting of them. A lot of that leading to suicidal ideation, and I do per diem work up at our partial hospitalization program, and there's overlap between kids that are at partial who are also living at family house who also come to Midway. So we see youth also who have maybe had ongoing mental health issues and have had some hospitalizations, possible suicide attempts, and are really unsure of what they need. But whatever the family dynamic is happening, they're stuck. They're stuck. And even the parents will sometimes know we're stuck. We don't know what else to do. And in those cases, when we have parents who want to be involved and who are able to be involved, the goal is always those are your permanent people. So how do we connect with them and get them into play? So I think that's most of what I'm thinking about for Midway. I'll throw it over to Robert, what you're seeing over there.
Thank you, Jen. It's such a great segue to what I want to touch on. You know, I want to preface what I'd like to share by pointing out that the mental health needs of our youth are multifaceted. And I say that primarily because while we may have, on the one hand, some young people who are diagnosed, we also have young people who may have undiagnosed conditions. So many of the youth that we serve, they have under the diagnosis, anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, and the like. But sometimes the symptoms of these potential conditions, you know, they begin to become a little like visible at times in the day. You know, for example, the young people tend to have difficulty sometimes regulating their emotions, you know, managing stress. For example, I've noticed that at night, some of the young people may tend to experience higher anxiety. It becomes like pretty obvious. In some cases, they may not only procrastinate to get to bed, but they may also then wake up a couple of times, you know, like in the night, overthinking some things, really needing some reassurance. And in anticipation of today's webinar, you know, I thought about a trend in particular that some of the staff and we only over time are just seeing more of it. And there happens to be certain teenagers who are bedwetters. And in some cases, sadly, they may even defecate, if I could say that, on themselves throughout the night. And my team and I, you know, we certainly understand how this may be a physical manifestation of some of the anxiety and the past trauma that they've been through. But as you can imagine, even handling those moments with respect is critical. And my team and I will usually try to respond in a calm way, in a very private way, and you know, by helping them either change their bed sheets, their clothes, or by using some, you know, getting them to use some hygienic products. But above everything, we just really try to offer plenty of reassurance without any shame. Jen made mention of, you used the term generational, and in some cases, some of the youth's mental health issues, we do see that as well. By that, what I mean is that some of their caregivers, they seem to be struggling with untreated mental health challenges. So for example, one of our current residents now, for the purpose of the presentation, I'll just call this young person David. But David has lived with their parent who has had a chronic mental illness ever since the parent was 14 years old. And while there's been some CPS involvements, David now actually is applying to the Midway program because on the one hand, truth be told, he's petrified about going back home, especially after all that he's been through. But then on the other hand, on a brighter note, he also knows because of peers and what they're sharing that Midway truly is an excellent service. I think with regard to trends, I'd also like to mention another trend that deals with the sense of punishment. You know, oftentimes we describe our shelters as being low barrier programs, right? And by that, meaning that our rules are flexible, intentionally, by the way, you know, trauma informed. But sometimes we get parents who expect us to run more like a placement program. You know, so which of course, you know, for those on the call that are aware with what that is, you know, those are young people that need higher level care. And so even though placements and RHY programs are starkly very different from one another, but we are seeing a trend where our parents, they just seem to really want to treat their child's stay at family house almost as if it's a form of punishment. And so one recent example that I have is a parent who became extremely upset when learning that their child had been taken out to the movies and we had taken the child out to go roller skating, simply because, in the parents' words, they just didn't feel that they deserved it. For those of us, of course, in the field, we know that these activities are not just for fun, but rather they bring a sense of healing, and they help to build trust and confidence and that sense of belonging. But all of that to say, Madeline, as it pertains to trends and what we're seeing really on the ground, so many of the youth that we're working with, they're really coming from some pretty chaotic or dysfunctional home environments, where the families themselves are either struggling with substance use, as I mentioned before, untreated mental health issues, domestic violence issues, unstable housing, and so forth. And I just see that in the work is such an increase with anger. And I say that because as we're about to, have a conversation about Maverick and the difference that Maverick does, the anger is so profound, which then translates into the deep work that has to go into the work to kind of get that parent and that young person to a place of reconciliation again.
Thank you. Yeah, the themes I'm hearing, grief, loss, anger, which are not in themselves, diagnosable mental health conditions, but they are all certainly related. They impact the program milieu. And I think you both did a really nice job speaking to the trauma responsive environments that your programs create, right? Your programs are not mental health programs, but they need to be responsive to the mental health and mental well-being needs of the young people. And you do that beautifully. So I'm going to ask Naima if you could introduce yourself and talk about, you are a mental health provider and you work closely with Family House. And can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? What is your role there? What do you do? And how do you see that as beneficial for the young people in that program?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Naima Muhammad. I'm a licensed social worker. I am a school social worker full-time, and I work for Maverick Psychotherapy Group part-time. And Maverick is partnered with Family of Woodstock, specifically the program that I am in is Family House. What I do there is I am the therapist there. I like to say I'm the therapist when I introduce myself to the kids or the new residents. I say I'm the therapist here on Monday nights. I put it real casual. And I say, we're going to do group and we're going to just chit chat if you want to. We're going to play games, get to know one another. And that's exactly what we do. I really keep it very casual on purpose, obviously with listening ears and eyes that aren't as casual, but I want to show up casually with the group. I always try to say that I like to show up as an adult who I would trust, keeping the youth centered, building rapport with them, taking walks. Family House is really in nature, right? There's a lot of trees and there's a nice little pathway that you can walk and things of that sort. So I like to do that because I'm usually coming from a full-time job. So like I want to take a walk by that time, and the kids do too. They're out of school. So I try to get our bodies moving, and as we walk, sometimes they trickle in one by one. So it's nice to have that one-on-one time with them. The engagement looks like playing games, being present. I like to include CBT work, motivational interviewing, especially with folks that are looking to go to Midway, right? Are they ready? I don't think, Robert and his team will ever throw a kid to a program or when they're not ready, right? So I try to help out with that and just see where their head is at, where their mind is at, and if they're ready for that kind of thing. During group sessions, depending on the group and depending on the maturity, right? Sometimes we get kids that are young, and then sometimes we get the 16 about to turn 17-year-olds, right? So you have to find a balance. Sometimes I won't run group because it's a dramatic age difference. We want to keep it appropriate. Some examples that I'll do with group, this is something new that I've done in the summer and last year I started doing it, but like doing music sessions. So I'll ask them to create like a mental health playlist and all clean music, of course. And the reason why I do that, one is because I really love music, and I know that teenagers like music. Some of them don't, but majority of them do. it gives me an idea of what they're connecting to, right? If a kid picks a happy song, great, right? Tell us why you picked that song. If they pick a more low mood, depressive song, right? We could talk about that too. A lot of the time, the teens know each other's playlists and they enjoy the same kind of songs. So it opens up a conversation about why that resonates with them in a more casual way. And most importantly, out of that exercise, I want to get to know them, right? When I was becoming a therapist and training and supervision and practicum and all that stuff, I wanted to work with teenagers, but I found them to be tough cookies. You know, I wasn't able to really connect with them. And I remember going to my supervisor at the time, my clinical supervisor, Thayer. He's a director here at Maverick. And I said, you know, this client is really tough. Like, I don't know, maybe I should pass him along. You know, I was ready to give up. And he was like, just relax. Like, he's like, relax and like, stop talking about mental health. Like, just play Uno or what are they into? And I was like, oh, well, they're into anime. They're into this, right? And back then, as a intern, I had some time on my hands. So like I watched a whole bunch of different anime stuff that they liked. And I know everyone doesn't have that kind of time. I'm just giving you an example of like taking a chill pill, right? And getting into things that maybe the youth that you serve enjoy and like so that you can have some common ground and maybe you could talk about something to break the ice. And that's extreme. Like I went on a binge of it with the anime stuff, but you know, just finding something that the majority of them like and just trying to get on their level. CBT work, I said that right. I'm a psychodynamic therapist. So I look for patterns and behaviors and things of that sort. And that's kind of hard to do in group. But if there's a kid that is in that's a longer stay, I can start to put some patterns together and behaviors and especially defense mechanisms. That's another topic that I like to talk about because I feel like the kids they can grasp it when we talk about defense mechanisms and coping skills, especially when we do like safety plans and things of that sort. Like what gets you really upset, right? Who can you call? Who are your people? Do you have people? If you don't have people, what about your school community, right? A lot of times these kids do have a person, right? But sometimes you have to like name it for them and just start to help them to think about these people that are in their lives that they maybe want to start to trust or build a rapport with. What else do I do there? Family work, right? Robert, please jump in if I'm forgetting something. I do some family work. I have done family work in the past. What that looks like, sometimes I can do some mediation. Sometimes kids come in and they're really angry at their family for good reasons. And sometimes parents are really mad at their children for good reasons. So sometimes mediation is necessary, right? We go into the office, a rec room in a private area and hash it out. And typically we're just listening a lot of the time. They're really doing the work, just really being good listeners and helping them think about different ways to think about the hard things that are happening in their lives. And I have done some aftercare work with families as well. Offering them to come back to family house or doing virtual. The virtual stuff sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on what life looks like after their kids are returned or reunification happens. But the aftercare is really important. Like, how are things going? What are the issues that are coming up? Creating plans to make things work smoothly, things of that sort. Yeah, Robert, I don't know if there's anything else, but I really enjoy being at Family House.
I like to, if possible, I have a couple of thoughts. I hope I can kind of connect the dots and kind of articulate them right. But Naeem, I want to just touch upon your presence itself. You know, Family of Woodstock, we're very big on interagency collaborations. So I know that there's some people on the call that they're involved with Oasis and with OMH, and you know, we're extremely very fortunate to have an Oasis funded substance use prevention program. We also have an OMH funded family peer support program that helps families strengthen their relationships with their children. And all of that to say, you know, having Naima on site, when I think about these very comprehensive dynamics that our youth are up against, it takes a village. We've heard that. But Naima's presence at the program, pretty much to me, it allows the residents to access therapy immediately, but at the same time to kind of send a message that seeking that type of help is okay. Not to mention the fact that she's in close proximity to our team. I think that what makes Naima's presence so strong and effective is that the young people are not looking at her as an outside guest. Like they look at Naima, they see another member of our team. And so even when I was thinking about this call, and I'm thinking about Governor Hochul's new law, it's such a game changer. Obviously, the young people now consenting to their own services. What's also kind of becoming normalized is, as I mentioned before, it's okay to ask for help in this type of new way. And so I think that in some ways, having had Naima directly on site over at Family House, something kind of similar. It's helping to reduce some of the stigma that can be associated with therapy. And because she's very approachable and warm, the young people, again, they feel heard and well supported. So I just wanted to say that much, Naima. We appreciate your presence at the program.
I appreciate it.
There's a lot of positivity coming through the chat for everything that's being said also.
Awesome.
And Robert, I think that was a perfect segue to my next question, which is, of course, we can, expect positive
Yeah.
impact, I'll say, on young people, right, from having the therapeutic environment and presence of Naima. I'm wondering if anybody wants to speak to positive impacts you've observed in family dynamics, in staff, in the program culture as a whole, by incorporating mental health services into runaway and homeless youth settings.
One of the first thoughts that came to me, Madeline, is, being in human services, we get inspired and we kind of talk about all the positive things and so forth. But truth be told, though we're striving for family reunification, but unfortunately, there are some families that remain very disengaged. And very recently, Naima and I had briefly spoken about how do we kind of somehow think of ways to spark their interest, somehow. And, I should say this too, but first to the panel and to the audience, we remain open to suggestions from anyone who has, any ideas. But so far, we have been thinking about maybe communicating our services, and especially with this new law that has gone into effect, just really communicating our services a little differently. For example, by possibly distributing a welcome letter of sorts that could maybe help delineate some of the program's purpose, as well as how our services could in fact benefit some of the family members as well. And then because, some of the families may possibly prioritize work, you figure the housing crisis and the increased cost of living and everything. Naima and I also spoke about the possibility of looking into making herself a little bit more available by Zoom, which could probably be helpful to some families as well. And again, while we remain open to any suggestions, another idea that we had was to think about maybe putting together a family night ever so often, just as a way for us to kind of possibly just kind of meet some of the parents, the guardians in a casual way, and then hopefully build stronger connections with them. But again, I don't want to sound unrealistic when we talk about all the good stuff. The sad reality is that I can even think of a couple of young people that come to my mind at the start of the school year. Parents are not there to give them school supplies, or even when we're going through the holidays, you would think they get at least a telephone call, and sometimes for far too many, that doesn't really seem to happen.
Yeah, I can jump in and share a little similar to like what Robert's speaking to. I wanted to share, just touch a little bit on how the staff are also helped by Maverick, because so Family of Woodstock in general has a connection to Maverick as a whole. So like the agency to agency kind of connected a few years ago. It's been a good amount of years now. And so in addition to Naima over at Family House, there is someone who goes to our domestic violence shelter from Maverick. There's someone who I think goes to our homeless shelters, the family shelter, and we also have someone who works at Maverick, a therapist who comes. I don't remember if it's once a week or possibly every other week, but she comes specifically for staff. And this is an offering where a lot of heavy stuff happens. Like the staff are holding a lot of things. And I sometimes feel very privileged that I have these youth and we can kind of build with them. And all right, I have 6 kids here and 6 kids there, and then I can build with the families, and then we're long term. So once we kind of get that going, all right, this is where we're running for a few months at least, right? We have a little bit of stability in our lives, but our crisis shelters are dealing with so much. And even more so are we have case managers who work with individuals with significant mental health needs living on their own as well in apartments. Most recently, our case management program lost someone. I'm not sure what happened, but there was a death of one of their clients, and so the ability to have um, a licensed professional just to know that they're there and to hold space for the staff as they're holding this heavy stuff as well. I know I have found that completely vital for our staff here because we see heartache and pain, and it's especially once you get to really have that trusting bond, to when their pain starts to rise and they're starting to put words to it, and kids are, I mean, teenagers are, they are just miraculous in my mind. Like sometimes I am blown away. I think back to who I was at 19. There'd be no way I would have like shared that with someone and then trusted someone to actually help me. So, it's miraculous what we see here. And then, but then we hold it. And also to share on Robert's point about just bringing in family. Um, we also have at Midway, visitors are allowed. We encourage that. We do lots of game nights, dinners, and stuff like that. And we want their friends even to come over so that can continue so they can have those bonds going on. But for our kids that have moms that are in homeless situations, it can be difficult because they have a lot of mental health stuff. It's a big ask for me to ask my staff to not only run the house, and we're like, bare bones staff. So on a weekend, there's one person working. And for them to have the 6 youth, now a toddler in this house, and to have a mom who might have some significant mental health needs, that's a big ask. And if we can do that, that is monumental for this kid to spend time with their mother. And that just happened this weekend where, I mean, it is breathtaking sometimes to watch. Like the love between these kids and their mothers, even though there's been so much let down, there's been so much ways that they've been in danger, that they've had troubles, they've had struggles. Um, it's really quite beautiful for us to witness. And so we really are a program with as least amount of barriers to all of that. Please come in, please, please, please spend time with your kids here. And that way they can work on their bonds while there's other adults as well. And if the youth needs, we had one mom that was often drinking of some sort, not coming over in the greatest condition. And so, we helped the youth create some boundaries around that for them, for their own selves. And that helps them in the future when they might, they're going to keep their mom in their life. We want, you love your mom. And to have no judgment, for us to welcome, for the kids to witness us, who they trust, welcome their mother, open arms, open hearts, no worries. Please, just please come in. We want you here. The youth wants you here. Um, but they're in their safe home with safe adults in their lives is really, that's the kind of stuff that's so hard to put into like the policy manual that we do.
Jen, I really do appreciate that you brought that detail about the staff and Naima's work with them. And I just want to kind of share something to underscore that. Um, I believe that Naima, she brings that value to the staff. So Family House, like many RHY programs, it is a hands-off program, which then means that whenever we've had those somewhat more rare instances, but it does happen, when a young person's exhibiting some strong behavioral challenges or even somewhat of a psychotic episode, it has happened. Staff now have had to problem solve without physical contact. For example, to be very specific, we've had the experience where a young person literally spit at a staff member in their face, and I make mention of that because, if you can just kind of imagine, that creates a lot of stress, that puts a lot of heaviness in the staff who are caring by nature. And so we truly do appreciate how Naima has made herself available to hold one-on-one sessions with the staff, do check-ins, go over self-care. She's complemented our staff meetings by doing group meetings and really helping them to manage through those challenging types of situations. I also want to point out something that I've mentioned to Naima as well, which I'm more on a positive note. When I had first joined Family House, this is going back some years now, but it was actually not uncommon for youth to be expressing their frustration by punching holes in the walls. This is before Naima days. And ever since Naima came on board, that seems to have happened far significantly much less over time. And I really believe that her guidance, that she provides to young people on managing their emotions has made a great difference. And it's something very visible at the program.
Naima, I'm just gonna ask you if there's anything else you want to add before we move on.
I was just thinking because we're talking about the kids, and this is what this is all about. But also, when we're talking about the kids, we can't dismiss their parents and their families. And I think, I'm a parenting journey facilitator. Some people may know what the parenting journey is. And when I do the work with the family, I really pull those skills and the parenting journey philosophy in the conversation. And that's like, all parents are good parents, right? Not despite what the paperwork says, despite what, right? And going in there with that energy to create a sense of belonging and safety. And I think that's really, really important as well, because some kids don't want to go back home, right? There is like very clear from the jump. And then others are open to it. So I think trying just to foster that positive energy and creating an energy that the parents know that we want to trust. Like, I trust you. I trust that you are being the best parent you could possibly be. And then starting from there, right? That's a little different from Midway, but I just wanted to mention that. I was thinking about it. Like, the parents are important too. And it's a system that we're dealing with, right? And that's all.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna ask one more question of Naima and Family of Woodstock. And that is, we have folks on the line who either are staff at other Runaway and homeless youth programs and who are mental health professionals and providers. If someone in either one of those groups wanted to work toward creating something like what you all have, what advice would you have for them? What should they think about? How would somebody make the next step to build a partnership like there is between Maverick and Family of Woodstock?
One of the first things that came to my mind, Madeline, is Michael Berg. Our executive director, he's truly focused on supporting the community and just really finding ways to strengthen all of our services. And I'm not sure if he's on the call, but it really was Michael who was the person who helped start the partnership, the collaboration with Maverick. My understanding is that he communicated with the Noble Foundation, and the Noble Foundation was the entity that then provided the funding, as Jen pointed out, not to have one therapist, but to have, I think, Jen, it's approximately 5 at like different locations. And so to those on the call that are kind of wondering, like, how does this get started? And then, the Noble Foundation, I should say, they're based out of Kingston, New York. They pretty much oversee grants and major projects in the area. Their main focus seems to be supporting communities that have been historically marginalized. But with that said, again, not sure if Michael was able to join us, but I'm pretty sure that if anybody wanted to learn more information about how he went about doing that, he's pretty open to sharing info. But on that note, I will add this other tidbit, Madeline, to your question. I think communication is key. I think that for starters, just communicating on every level, whether that may entail, talk about the residents, family dynamics, I think that communication is truly, truly key. And again, not to sound repetitive, but when Naima's at Family House, she's really part of the team. It's not like she's contracted out. She is at the table, and we are updating her to the best of our ability about everything that we, for the most part, know. especially as it pertains to the youth and to their families.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that of if, you know, for all who have sought grant funded stuff, so often the requests for proposals are for new things. And so, you know, if you have a gap in and you're trying to be like, oh, I'm trying to like get the funding for like this program I already have, that can be difficult because a lot of times they're like, well, that, you know, I'm not trying to fund something you're already doing. We're looking to fund something brand new. And that definitely foundation grants is kind of where our heads have been at recently, I would say. And so the ability to, if this is something that's not part of a program at all, to be able to find a mental health agency that might be willing, they're, you know, they'll get paid if you can get foundation money to then fund it. And then the foundation is like, all right, this is what we're doing. So you write the grant, you get the funding from the foundation. The agency is willing and able and has the flexibility to be able, and then they're paid. And then that's how we ended up getting it done. And also, I would say, Maverick in general has been just such like they really it's a place that feels very connected to the community. Like they're in it for the right reasons, and I think families in it for the right reasons. So it's finding your people, finding the like-minded entities out there, and then getting creative with it because I would say Michael, our executive director, many years that I've been here, he's always been like, we're not a mental health place. This if we're offering a shelter and a home, then it needs to be a home. And you're not getting therapy in your house, and I'm not getting therapy in my house. So why would we put therapy in that? And so it took him time to realize, yes, we're running a home. We built a home. We have a team. This is all home. And then we have these safe people who come in who are able to also connect with the youth. And as Naima and Robert shared, you know, I take it very seriously who I invite into Midway always, because once we have a trust with them, and it's very interesting because you would think like, oh, they're going to be like unsure about, you know, new people. They're looking to us. And once they trust us, anyone I bring here, there's almost like already a trust and they're gonna feel that out. And so I take it very seriously. And so being able to have people that we're inviting into our programs, they already bonded with us, they're trusting us. It kind of takes some of that fear away of especially youth, man, because so many of them have been forced into therapy and were forced to go when they did not want to, or they were forced to stay with a therapist that they did not connect to or did not trust, or they experienced, because especially with young kids, right? It's I said something to my therapist, didn't know my mom was going to know. And so there's so many things that make it so they don't want to do that. So to have someone in our trusted place coming in, visiting maybe, like for all of our houses, I think it's such a gift. So if it's possible to get that going, even if it's creative and it's once a month and it's slow moving, because we didn't know when all of this started. We didn't know how it was going to work.
And to that point, Jen, I also want to add, you sparked a remembrance for me because something that came out of that collaboration, I remember initially what Maverick did, which I really appreciated, they actually began to meet with us and they began to go to the different locations, just like what you touched upon. And, you know, they really were very careful with trying to familiarize themselves with, again, the house and the programs and the rules and the routines. And so absolutely, if anybody is thinking about maybe exploring a possible collaboration of this nature, certainly is to encourage persons to truly understand the environment, like Jen touched on, as well as the workplace culture. And also, you know, again, with the new law that's being passed, I think where we are is to make an intentional effort to normalize mental health services. You know, I think that it's important to express that a young person who cares about their self-care and or participates with therapy, that's not a bad thing. You know, as of right now, for example, we have not only posted a few internal made flyers at the program to kind of touch upon the new hygiene law, but the staff have also started to hold group discussions with the young people as part of raising greater awareness among them.
Naima, anything you want to add? Things to think about before starting a partnership like this.
I would say get to know the partner. Right? You definitely want to make sure that you guys are on the same page. And like it was said before, knowing that they're for the community and being flexible and being open-minded. That's what I would add.
Thank you. So for the sake of time, we want to make sure we have enough for all the questions that are coming in. So Jackie, I'm going to ask if we could not look at those resource slides. And for the folks watching, there are some slides that have links to OCFS and OMH's website that can help you navigate services. Those will be posted after. You can also just go check out our websites now, but we maybe cannot show those right now because I want to make sure we get to Shannon, who joins us from Office of Mental Health. And we have been referencing this law, this new law, this new law. What are we talking about, Shannon? What's the law? What does it do for us?
Thank you so much. It's no, it's been great and really a privilege to be here. I'd probably piggyback off of Naima and Jen and lots of others who are lifting up wanting to remove barriers to access and services that young people and their families need. And in that vein, Commissioner and others have worked really hard to make sure that minors can consent when they're looking for treatment from OMH licensed providers and programs. The memo that was put out, which actually went live August 7th of this past year, I'm sure you have the link in the first presentation, but I can also share it again here. I feel like it's written a little convoluted. I like it just to be a little bit more straightforward. But I think for the purposes of this audience, just a couple, like 2 things to remember. So one, the memo is outlining, again, that homeless youth and runaway youth actually fall into a different category that can consent already. So just want to emphasize that already again, but that also then we're adding more consenting rights for young people under the age of 18 who are seeking services. And if potentially those services need parental approval, if in some of the cases laid out in the memo, parent hasn't been available, the youth is willingly seeking services, the parent has not been around to consent and the services are warranted, that then they're able to consent on their own. So the memo just lays out some of those exceptions and some of those circumstances, while also reiterating which groups can already consent and kind of re-emphasizing that. So I can put that in that in there, but no, it's I think it's not well known. It's one of these things. Its mental hygiene law was updated. It takes a lot to do that. We had a lot of support from legislature as well, which is great. But it's important to get these things out there and to talk about real use cases. So as much as everyone can talk about this, emphasize this, explain what it might mean in practice, I think that's really important because, we learn one set of things in school, or we know one set of things, and then things change, right? The field changes, laws change. And so how we get that information out there is important for practitioners. So hopefully that was simply said. That's my goal, but I'm happy to provide any other information.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud of the work that Runaway and Homeless Youth programs do. And I'm also incredibly proud of the way you lead your work with love. I think love is often considered a dirty word when we're talking about young people, but it is their most primal, most fundamental need. And you all bring that to them every day. And I want to thank you all for doing that. So at this point, we'll conclude our panel, but are open to questions.
Thank you so much. This was really incredible. Such a good, so good to hear about your collaboration. I feel like everybody in the chat really is very inspired by the work that you all are doing. And thank you so much, Shannon, for putting the link to that legislation in the chat. I really appreciate it. So we have some questions that came in. So someone asked about waiting lists for Family House and Midway and how you all deal with that.
I can jump in on that if you can. So while we're not opposed to serving as many young people as possible, but safety also remains on top of our priority. And so with that, it's very crucial for our program to carefully determine which youth are in fact appropriate for our shelter. It's a matter of balancing their needs, but together not losing sight of the needs of the other young people. So with that having been said, we try to act as a team thoughtfully, but also swiftly, because realistically our young people need shelter. And as part of really trying to ensure that we're bringing the right person. Sometimes it's a young person who, because of either chemistry or things that are happening within the house, it's a matter of maybe waiting one more day, make a difference just to that. But when I think of that question, I also think about um, those youth that would be deemed appropriate for family house. And I just want to say that when referring a young person to family house or an RHY program for that matter, it really comes down to their immediate needs. These programs are best for youth who are unstably housed, in crisis, or need a safe place to stabilize. I think the guiding principle, if you will, is pretty simple. Just refer young people that the program can in fact meet their immediate safety and support needs, not when their needs go beyond our capacity, or if they need anything that's long-term stay.
Yeah, and for Midway, because there's 6 beds in each household, and because we're long terms, we'll fill up. And so we might end up with applications or people that are trying to get into Midway. But beautifully, I mean, again, shout out to our Michael. Family Woodstock has built this big agency that kind of captures all different needs. And so if someone comes to me saying, "Hey, I really feel like, I need to come to Midway," if they need crisis housing, then I can still meet with them and then we can kind of assess, would a non-resident, are you okay where you are for a little bit, and a non-residential case manager might be helpful. I could refer you there. If you're under 18, I can refer you to Family House, and if you're over 18, we have case managers that'll help you get to DSS, and a single person's homeless shelter, a family shelter, and a domestic violence shelter even. So thankfully, and what a privilege to have the things that I would need inside our own agency, where I can call, and it's not just like making a referral to an agency. It's me being like, "Hey, Amy, I need I need to send someone over to you." So
And I just
That's
want to
great.
also name that I threw it in the chat. It's a program directory of all of the certified runaway and homeless youth programs in the state. So if you're looking for one, it's there. And if you're struggling to find something, you can contact every county has a youth bureau. And those with runaway and homeless youth programs have a coordinator whose job it is to help find resources for young people in need. And also every county has a runaway and homeless youth plan in their CFSP that has to articulate what happens when a young person needs emergency housing. So if you're looking for a place, start with the program directory, and then I would direct you to your county.
That's incredible. Thank you, Madeline. And I feel like the next question sort of maybe goes with that as well. Someone asked about how you support youth that have intellectual developmental disabilities. I feel like that maybe is something that you could then search for in that directory as like a sort of specialized service.
And I would say in our program too, we would also have, if they're in the school system, connecting with the school, all of our Family House and Midway have case managers on site. And mostly we're dealing inside Ulster County. So we're kind of dealing with county stuff. And so eventually you kind of get to know people, and we've all kind of been around for a bit. So you're able to kind of know the liaison over here, liaison over there, and hook them up with someone inside of either a school system or um, even just an outside service that might be helpful. And I'm trying to think if there's I don't know of any other referrals that we would do, but it wouldn't be a barrier, I would say, to coming.
That's great. I was wondering, also, okay, sorry, I'm looking at the questions now. So you have a lot of staff that work at your shelter that are not mental health staff, but you have a lot of young people that have a lot of mental health needs. I know that you talked about how partnering with Maverick has really helped in terms of helping to manage the staff's needs. I'm wondering if there's any other like ongoing education or training or other ways that you support the staff in sort of, again, as non-mental health providers to be able to meet those young people in terms of their variety of needs.
So much, so much. Well, and both Robert and I have a master's in social work, so we have the background of being able to like bring social work stuff into our program. But I would feel like, speaking for me, while I have a connection with each of the youth who live here, because they're right here, they're right there outside my door right now. But I would say my biggest job is managing my staff and being able to support them and give them so a lot of what I do is the way that I would want them to interact with the youth, and the way, and that means like self-regulation, that means uh normalizing seeking services when needed, and having those discussions. I feel like most of my staff, we talk very freely about therapy and stuff like that, and the connection and connecting for our own self, and also because we're relatively small staffs in each houses, um each house has like 5 or 6 people that are like full time, and then we have some fill in. But we do a lot to really try to make sure that the communication is going well, and that we have opportunities to support one another. I think it's so huge to be able to be the person who is regulated in the room, and to acknowledge. I was just saying to John actually earlier how when we have a disruption, say something's happening, we just had a kid that maybe didn't come home on time, and there's stuff when we're getting worried that maybe there's some gang affiliation, there's stuff going on that we're talking about. It's so important that the staff can trust us to share how they're feeling about it without us getting defensive, without us being like defending our moves or anything like that, for them to be able to talk to us, for us to validate and hear that, and as a team to be like, okay, and this boy's been doing so great, and he has been so respectful for this house, and really helping all the staff see the positive stuff, and then together make a next, all right, well, what can we do that's going to make it feel safer for him and for us, and make sure we communicate that across the board we want him here. This is, if he wants to be here, I don't want to keep him against his will. If he wants to live here, we want. And so it takes that kind of conversation in either a morning, or we just had a case conference today, so we talked about that, and we do case conferences very regularly, to be able to say, what's our goal here? Our end goal is not that they obey us and that they listen and that they do as they're told. Our end goal is that they are learning and they feel safe, and that everyone else feels safe, and that they can stay here until they can go to a permanent place to live. And so it takes a lot of talking and energy for that.
I couldn't have said any better, Jen. I would add to the fact that I feel that in many ways, there's such a direct connection. The better you want, or the more effective you want to be with your young people, the better you want to remain present and attentive to your team. And in the spirit of training, if you will, I think that it's really exemplifying what it is that we'd like to see in them. And so I don't think that Family House can thrive, if you will, if it's about, the departments per se with cubicles or titles and things like that. I think that the spirit of the program has to remain one that we're all genuinely, authentically really in it together. If there's a disruption in the house and the team member can't go home, then I think that as a supervisor, it's our obligation to stay there with them and to remain present with them. To the point of trainings, I want to say, I don't know if everyone on the call is familiar, but I know that OCFS, they provide with a plethora of different trainings to complete for the team. But I also want to say that our agency also offers 48 hours of basic training around some pretty helpful topics. Some of those topics range between active listening and, youth mental health first aid, which is always very helpful, trauma-informed care, suicide prevention, culture diversity, and just a long list of different topics.
That's great. That's great. That's sort of all the questions that we have. Oh, I'm wondering, I was wondering also about ways that you support young people in their own parenting journey. You talked a lot about supporting families from the sort of the the child being the young person in care, but I want, since you you mentioned you have a toddler at the home right now, sort of how you support those young people on their journey to becoming parents.
Oh, it's such a sweet thing. And it's very difficult because we have youth who are pretty young and um are might not have the ability to look back and say, this is how you take care of a baby. And so we are thankful again that we live in a county that has a good amount of resources. So Healthy Families has been a huge connection for us so that we connect them to someone who's ongoing, coming in. And they start working with the youth right, before the baby's even born, if they come in and they're pregnant. For youth who come in already with their baby, again, Family Woodstock runs the childcare connections, and so we have ability to um, get them connected to childcare if that's something they would like. But there is a beautiful part that is hard to grasp sometimes, and even kids that might not get along or stuff like that, like I'm very clear with the rest of the residents that like that baby, this 2.5-year-old only knows that we all live here. They don't know, like all she knows is that we're her family. And so the other youth in the program take that really seriously. And it's really quite beautiful to watch, especially at this such an important age when the, infant, when they're learning to walk. The whole house is filled with little height charts from like various other babies in the ancient that have lived here. And so yeah, this 2.5-year-old she is just living in this house full of like care, and the other youth are really respectful of that. In fact, I will say we had a house group once, and two kids were getting, one youth I think just made a comment that was like just not nice, and the other kid got like offended by it. It's just like, ugh, what, Um, and he's really quick to sometimes get really upset. And I was in my office as they were meeting, and he's like, you know what, I got to get up. And he came to me and he was like, I was ready to go off, but the baby's here, and I have another girl who is pretty skittish, and he's like, so she's there. She's like, I didn't want to do that for the house. I didn't want to do that for them. Um, and it's just so beautiful to see how they all take care of her, and not in the like they're feeding her or anything. They just are mindful of creating a home for her. And when I first got Midway like 15, 16 years ago, I was like, how am I going to run this house with teenagers and infants and toddlers? Like that seems impossible. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Um, but every time, man, every time these kids step it up and they acknowledge that there is a baby in the house and we need to like not act like a fool in front of her. Like we have a responsibility to her. Even if I don't like, even when they don't like the mom, sometimes they get really frustrated with the mom. The other thing that we see a lot is the moms getting triggered a little bit by their babies being cared for, especially if they have a lot of neglect and pain in their history. And so another thing that we do as a team, and I remind people because it's very easy to just be like, give me that baby, like when that baby's around, or the 2-year-old runs to us, is you say, you first, there's mom. How are you doing? What's going on with you? I'm gonna have a conversation with you. We'll hold the baby, whatever, we're doing this, but you matter too. And I that can be really difficult sometimes to remember sometimes because the baby's screaming, the things going on. Um, but it's really important because I've seen the little twinges of pain of their baby getting what they didn't get sometimes, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That's really beautiful. We have about 3 minutes left. I'm wondering in the last couple minutes if there's anything that wasn't said that anyone would like to share. Things that maybe, that you liked about the partnership and what it's made it work. Any last resources?
I will say that, like for us for at Midway, because Maverick provided therapists over at our main office, that's how we have helped youth connect over. So we've brought, because we're 3 minutes from that office. So we do have access to the ability, and that has also worked. So even it was like another step in transition of wasn't someone in the home, but it was one of us that they trusted bringing us to a place that they trust. They've been before. It's Family Woodstock's main little hub there. And so again, it's almost like working that muscle of going to therapy. And it's just so important for young people to just do these smallest of steps sometimes to get them where they need to be.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone so much. Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Madeline, as our facilitator. And we hope that everyone will join us for future CTAC offerings. Again, please fill out the in the chat, there should be our survey. And if you have any requests for future offerings, please attend. We have an upcoming offering on October 23rd on problem solving aggressive behavior in young people with Dr. Ross Green. So we hope that everyone will join us for that. And you can see all of our resources and future offerings on mcsilverta.org, our website. That's also where our slides will be posted in a couple of days. Again, thank you to everyone and hope that everyone has a great day, great rest of your day.